The stagecoach wheels churned up dust as Vivian Wallace pressed one trembling hand against her swollen belly, wondering if the man waiting at the end of this journey would take one look at her condition and send her right back to Philadelphia on the next departing coach. It was late August in 1878, and the Wyoming Territory stretched endlessly before her, golden and harsh under an unforgiving sun. The advertisement had been simple enough, placed by a rancher named Warren Whitfield seeking a wife to help manage his homestead outside Pendleton, Wyoming. She had answered with equal simplicity, mentioning her skills in cooking, sewing, and keeping accounts. What she had not mentioned was the child growing inside her, the result of a brief and ultimately tragic romance with a man who had promised marriage before a factory accident claimed his life 3 months past. The other passengers in the coach included an older woman who had not stopped talking since Cheyenne, a traveling salesman with a waxed mustache, and a young couple clearly on their way to start their own adventure. None of them knew her secret yet, though the dress she wore would not hide her condition much longer. She was nearly 5 months along, and while clever tailoring had disguised the truth thus far, another month would make deception impossible. Vivian had written to Warren 2 weeks ago, a letter that should have arrived days before her own journey began. In it, she had confessed everything, offering him the choice to withdraw his proposal without judgment or obligation. She had received no response, which left her suspended between hope and dread. Perhaps the letter had not reached him. Perhaps it had, and he had chosen not to reply, leaving her to discover his rejection in person. Or perhaps, in some corner of her heart she barely dared acknowledge, he had received it and decided that her circumstances did not matter. The coach jerked to a halt outside a modest building that served as Pendleton's stage station. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered wooden structures lining a single main street, with the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. She accepted the driver's hand as he helped her down, her legs unsteady after hours of travel. "Miss Wallace." The voice came from her left, deep and careful. She turned to find a man approaching, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in shadow. He wore a simple shirt rolled to the elbows, work-worn trousers, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was honest, marked by weather and hard work rather than age. She guessed he might be 26 or 27, only a handful of years older than her own 23. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, surprised by how steady her voice emerged. He removed his hat, revealing brown hair that wanted cutting. "Warren, please, I got your letter." He said it quietly, his gaze meeting hers directly. All of it. The world seemed to still around them. The other passengers dispersed to their destinations. The horses stamped and blew. Somewhere a dog barked, but Vivian heard only the thunder of her own heart. "I understand if you have reconsidered," she began, the words she had rehearsed 100 times suddenly inadequate. "I took a risk in coming, but I could not remain in Philadelphia. My family, they would not forgive the circumstances. I have some money saved, enough to find lodging until I can secure employment, or perhaps passage to another territory where I might start fresh with fewer questions asked." "Miss Wallace." He held up one hand, gentle but firm. "I asked you here to be my wife. That has not changed." She stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. Warren glanced around at the street, where more than one curious face had turned their direction. "This might not be the best place for this conversation. Would you walk with me? Your trunk can wait an hour." She nodded, and he offered his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. They walked past the general store, past a saloon from which piano music jangled, past a church with a simple white steeple. At the edge of town, a path led toward a stand of cottonwoods, and beneath their shade, Warren stopped. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice still carrying that careful quality as though he was weighing each word. "I am not a wealthy man. My ranch is small, 160 acres that I am proving up for the Homestead Act. I have cattle, about 40 head, some chickens, 2 horses, and a mule with an attitude that would try the patience of a saint. The house is sturdy but plain. I built it myself, and while it does not leak, I would not call it elegant." "I did not expect elegance," Vivian said softly. "I placed that advertisement because ranching alone is a hard life and lonelier than I care for. I wanted a partner, someone to build something with. When I got your letter, my first thought was not about the child. It was about your courage in telling me the truth when you could have hidden it until after the wedding, trapping me by law and custom." She felt heat rise to her face. "I considered it," she admitted, "but I could not begin a marriage with deception. That is why I am still standing here asking you to marry me." He met her eyes again, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "I lost my own father when I was young. I know what it is to grow up without that presence. If you will have me, I will stand as father to this child. Not because I must, but because I choose to. And maybe, in time, we will find more between us than simple convenience." The tears came before she could stop them, hot and sudden. She had prepared herself for rejection, for judgment, for conditional acceptance at best. This simple, honest offer of partnership and protection was more than she had dared imagine. "Why?" she whispered. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Warren reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "We are all carrying something, Miss Wallace. Some burdens show more than others, but we all have them. You are carrying a child who deserves a chance at a good life. I am carrying a ranch that needs more than one pair of hands and a heart that is tired of being alone. Maybe we can help each other with our burdens." She could not speak past the tightness in her throat, so she simply nodded. "There is a preacher in town," Warren continued. "We could marry today if you are willing, or we could wait. I have a spare room at the ranch, small but private. You would be safe and unchaperoned until you decide. I will not press you into anything you do not want." Vivian found her voice. "Today," she said. "If the offer is genuine, I see no reason to wait. I have no family to invite, no trousseau to prepare. And frankly, Mr. Whitfield, the sooner I have the protection of marriage, the easier my life will be." "Warren," he corrected gently. "If you are to be my wife, I would like to hear you use my name." "Warren," she repeated, tasting the shape of it, "and you must call me Vivian." His smile was small but genuine, transforming his serious face into something warmer. "Vivian it is." They returned to town, where Warren arranged for her trunk to be loaded onto his wagon while Vivian waited outside the general store. Several women passed, their eyes sharp with curiosity, their whispers barely concealed. She lifted her chin, refusing to show the anxiety that churned inside her. Soon enough, the truth of her condition would be obvious. Let them talk. She would have a husband and a home, which was more than she had any right to expect. The wedding took place in the small church, with the preacher's wife and the store clerk serving as witnesses. The ceremony was brief, the words familiar from 100 weddings Vivian had attended in her former life. She wore her traveling dress, dusty from the journey. Warren stood beside her in the same work clothes he had worn to meet her, though he had taken a moment to brush the dust from his hat. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Warren leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek, his lips warm and careful. "Thank you," he whispered against her ear, so quietly she almost missed it. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour. the wagon jolting over ruts in the dirt road. The land around them was beautiful in a stark, open way that was nothing like the crowded streets of Philadelphia. Grass rippled like water under the wind, and the sky stretched wider than seemed possible, blue and endless. "That is the property line," Warren said, pointing to a marker post. "And there, that is the house." It sat in a small valley, protected from the worst of the wind by a rise of land to the north. The house was indeed plain, a simple rectangle of timber with a covered porch across the front. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a small corral where 2 horses watched their approach with lazy interest. Warren helped her down from the wagon, his hands firm at her waist. She felt the child flutter inside her, responding to the movement, and pressed a hand to her belly instinctively. "Are you well?" Warren asked immediately, concern sharpening his features. "Yes, just the baby moving. It happens more frequently now." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite name. "Come inside. You must be exhausted." The interior of the house was as simple as the exterior, but clean and well maintained. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, shelves holding dishes and supplies. 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "That one is yours," Warren said, indicating the door on the left. "I will bring in your trunk." Vivian explored the room while he worked. It was small as he had warned, but furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a chair. The window looked east toward the sunrise. A quilt covered the bed, clearly handmade, the stitching careful and even. "My mother made that," Warren said from the doorway, her trunk balanced on one shoulder. "She passed 6 years ago. I thought you might like to have it." "It is beautiful," Vivian said honestly, running her hand over the pattern of stars and diamonds. "Thank you." He set the trunk at the foot of the bed. "I will leave you to rest. There is water in the pitcher and the necessary is behind the house. Just follow the path. I need to see to the animals, but I will be back to make supper in a few hours." "I can cook," Vivian protested. "That was part of our agreement." "Tonight you rest," Warren said firmly. "You have been traveling for days. Tomorrow is soon enough to start sharing the work." He left before she could argue further, his boots echoing across the wooden floor. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of her new reality. This morning, she had been a desperate woman hoping for a miracle. Now she was married to a man she had known for less than 3 hours, in a house on the Wyoming frontier, carrying another man's child. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt the first stirring of something that might have been hope. The next days fell into a rhythm that surprised Vivian with its ease. Warren rose before dawn to tend the animals and ride out to check on his cattle. She prepared breakfast, simple fare of eggs and bacon and bread she learned to bake in the cast iron oven. They ate together, mostly in comfortable silence, though Warren would sometimes share his plans for the day or ask her opinion on matters around the ranch. He was unfailingly respectful, treating her with a courtesy that bordered on formal. He never entered her room without knocking, never touched her beyond helping her over rough ground or down from the wagon. At night, she heard him moving in his own room, the creak of his bed, the sound of his boots being dropped to the floor. The wall between them was thin enough that she could hear him breathe, a strangely intimate thing that made her blush in the darkness. A week after their marriage, Vivian was hanging laundry on the line Warren had strung between 2 posts when she felt him watching her. She turned to find him standing by the barn, his attention fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You are working too hard," he said, approaching. "You should be resting more." "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she replied, though she said it gently. Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time. Still, he took the wet sheet from her hands and hung it himself, his movements deft despite the domestic nature of the task. I worry. About the child, about you both. Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. He was staring at the horizon, his jaw tight. Warren, what is it? He was quiet for a long moment. There is no doctor in Pendleton. The nearest one is in Cheyenne, 2 days' ride. When the time comes, there is a midwife, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson who has delivered most of the babies in these parts. I have already spoken to her, told her to expect to be called when you need her. Vivian felt warmth spread through her chest. You have been planning. Of course I have been planning. He finally looked at her, and the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. You are my wife. That child is now my responsibility. I take my responsibilities seriously. Our child, she said softly, remembering his words from their first meeting. You said if I married you, it would be our child. Our child, he agreed, and this time when he said it, something shifted between them, some invisible wall crumbling just a little. The summer heat gave way to the first cool breath of autumn. Vivian's belly grew rounder, impossible to hide now, and she saw the looks from the women in town on the rare occasions Warren took her with him for supplies. They were calculating looks, counting backwards, judging. She held her head high and ignored them, her hand resting protectively over her child. They will talk no matter what we do, Warren said as they drove home one afternoon, the wagon bed full of flour and sugar and other necessities. Let them. We know the truth of our situation. Does it not bother you, Vivian asked, that they think the child is yours conceived in sin? I would rather they think that than know the real story and judge you for it. He glanced at her. Your past does not concern me, Vivian, only our future, our future. He said it so easily, as though it were a simple fact rather than a fragile hope. That night after supper, Warren carried wood for the fire while Vivian washed dishes. Her back had been aching all day, and she winced as she reached to put a plate on the shelf. Sit, Warren commanded, appearing at her elbow. I will finish. Warren, I am fine. You are in pain. I can see it in the way you are moving. Sit in the rocking chair. I will finish the dishes, and then I will rub your back if you will allow it. She wanted to protest, but the ache was wearing her down and the offer was too tempting. She settled into the rocking chair, the firelight warming her face. True to his word, Warren finished the dishes quickly, then pulled the straight-backed chair over to sit behind her. May I? She nodded, and his hand settled on her lower back, strong and sure. He worked the tight muscles with a skill that surprised her, finding the knots and easing them with steady pressure. Vivian could not stop the small sound of relief that escaped her. My mother had trouble with her back when she was carrying my younger brother, Warren said quietly, still working. My father used to do this for her in the evenings. I watched him, learned how. How old were you? 8 when my brother was born. 10 when we lost them both to fever. His hand stilled on her back, and Vivian reached around to cover one with her own. I am sorry. It was a long time ago, but his voice was rough with old grief. My father followed them not 6 months later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think he died of a broken heart. After that, it was just me and my older sister. She married a few years back, moved to Montana with her husband. I have not seen her in 2 years. You must miss her. I do. His hands resumed their work, gentler now, but I have you now, and soon we will have a child in this house. It will be good to hear that sound again, a baby crying in the night. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. You are a good man, Warren Whitfield. I am trying to be, he said. For you, I am trying. October brought the first frost and news that rippled through Pendleton like a shockwave. A family had been attacked on their homestead 20 miles north, their horses stolen, their supplies taken. The husband had been beaten badly, the wife and children terrorized. The territorial marshal was investigating, but roads were long and law was thin in this part of Wyoming. Warren rode into town the day after the news broke and came back with a rifle he had purchased from the general store. That night, he showed Vivian how to load it, how to sight along the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger rather than pulling it. "I do not want to frighten you," he said, "but you need to know how to protect yourself. Most of the time I will be close, but when I am out with the cattle, you will be alone here. I need to know you can defend yourself if necessary." Vivian's hands trembled as she held the weapon, heavy and cold. "I have never fired a gun." "Then we will practice tomorrow. Just knowing how can make the difference." They spent the next afternoon in the field behind the barn, Warren patient as she learned to handle the rifle. The kick surprised her the first time she fired, slamming back into her shoulder with enough force to knock her off balance. Warren caught her, his arms steady around her. "Brace yourself more," he instructed, positioning her again. "Lean into it. The gun is not your enemy. It is a tool, nothing more." By the end of the afternoon, she could hit the targets he set up more often than not. Her shoulder would be bruised tomorrow, but she felt capable in a way she had not before. "You did well," Warren said as they walked back to the house, the sun setting fire to the western sky. "I hope you never need to use that skill, but I am glad you have it now." That night, he moved his bedroll into the main room, sleeping on the floor by the fireplace. When Vivian protested, he shook his head. "Until we know what happened to that family was an isolated incident, I am not taking chances. I can hear both doors from here. Anyone tries to come in, I will know." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was being overly cautious, but the memory of the fear in the faces of the townswomen stopped her. This was the frontier, and safety was never guaranteed. The trouble, when it came, arrived on a cold November morning. Warren had ridden out early to check on a section of fence he suspected might be down. Vivian was kneading bread dough, her belly making the work awkward but manageable, when she heard horses approaching. 3 men rode into the yard, rough-looking and travel-worn. Something about the way they surveyed the property made Vivian's stomach tighten with fear. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch, keeping the door open behind her, knowing the rifle hung just inside. "Morning, madam," the leader called. He was older than the other two, with a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw. "This the Whitfield place?" "It is," Vivian said, keeping her voice steady. "My husband is expected back shortly. Can I help you with something? Just passing through, thought we might water our horses." The man's eyes traveled over her, lingering on her pregnant belly in a way that made her skin crawl. "Seems like you are out here all alone. As I said, my husband will return any moment." She stepped back slightly, her hand reaching for the doorframe. "You are welcome to use the pump by the trough, then I must ask you to be on your way." The 3 men exchanged glances. The leader swung down from his horse and the other 2 followed. "Now, that does not seem very hospitable," the man said, walking toward the porch. "We have been riding for days. Seems like a woman alone could spare some food for weary travelers. I said my husband will be back shortly." Vivian's hand found the rifle, and she brought it up smoothly, the way Warren had taught her. "Water your horses and go, or I will give you a reason to leave faster." The man stopped, surprise flickering across his scarred face. Then he laughed. "You going to shoot me, little mother, in your condition, if I have to?" She aimed at his chest, remembering Warren's instructions. "Center mass, the largest target. I may be pregnant, but my aim is steady and this rifle is loaded. Test me if you doubt it." For a long moment they stood frozen in tableau. Then, from the direction of the north pasture, came the sound of hoofbeats. Warren appeared over the rise, riding hard, and even from a distance, Vivian could see the fury in his posture. He reined in his horse in a spray of dirt, the animal dancing beneath him. His own rifle was already in his hands, and he levered around into the chamber with a sharp, metallic sound that cut through the morning air. "You have 3 seconds to mount up and ride out," Warren said, his voice deadly calm. 1. The 3 men looked at each other. 2. The leader held up his hands. "Just wanted some water, friend. No harm meant." 3. They scrambled for their horses, mounting in a tangle of limbs and cursing. Warren kept his rifle trained on them as they rode out, not lowering it until they disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he dismount and climb the porch steps, taking the rifle gently from Vivian's shaking hands. "You did exactly right," he said, setting both rifles aside and pulling her into his arms. "God, when I saw them in the yard, I thought my heart would stop." Vivian buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and horse and clean sweat. "I was so frightened. You did not show it. You were strong." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "You were magnificent." Before either of them could think better of it, he kissed her, fierce and brief, his lips warm against hers. Then he froze, apparently realizing what he had done, and started to pull away. Vivian caught his shirt, holding him close. "Do not apologize," she whispered. "I should not have done that without asking. Warren, we are married, and I wanted you to kiss me." She felt her cheeks heat but forced herself to meet his eyes. "I have wanted you to kiss me for weeks now." Something ignited in his gaze, something that made her breath catch. "Vivian, I know this marriage started as a convenience," she said quickly, before her courage could fail. "But it has become more than that for me. I do not know when it happened, perhaps gradually over these past months, or perhaps all at once in moments I did not recognize. But I care for you, Warren. Deeply." His thumb traced her lower lip, a touch so tender it made her want to weep. "I have been half in love with you since the day you stepped off that stage," he said roughly. "Watching you these months, seeing your courage and your kindness, the way you have made this house a home, it has been the sweetest torture. I wanted to court you properly, to give you time to know me before I spoke of my feelings. I did not want you to feel obligated to return them because of our arrangement." "I am not obligated," Vivian said. "I am choosing this. I am choosing you." He kissed her again, slower this time, his mouth learning the shape of hers. His hands were careful on her back, mindful of her condition, but the kiss itself was anything but tentative. It spoke of all the restrained longing of the past months, all the careful distance they had maintained, crumbling now into something real and urgent and true. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren pressed his forehead to hers. "We should go inside," he said. "Those men might come back, or there might be others. I need to keep you safe." They spent the rest of the day together, Warren refusing to leave her alone even for a moment. He moved through the house, checking the windows, reinforcing the door bar, making sure the rifles were loaded and ready. Vivian watched him work, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept returning to her. That evening, after supper, he pulled his chair close to hers by the fire. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Those men, I have seen their type before. They are drifters, maybe bandits, taking advantage of isolated homesteads. The family that was attacked last month, I heard in town that it might have been the same group. The marshal is looking for them, but he is one man covering hundreds of miles." "What do we do?" Vivian asked. "We stay alert. I will not leave you alone if I can help it. If I must go far, you will come with me. And if anyone comes to the property again when I am not here, you lock yourself inside and shoot anyone who tries to break in. Do not hesitate, do not warn them, just shoot." The fear in his voice told her how seriously he took the threat. Vivian nodded. "I understand." "I will not lose you," Warren said fiercely, taking her hand. "Either of you. I have found something here, something I did not think I would ever have. A family, a future. I will fight to protect that." "We will protect each other," Vivian said. "That is what partners do." The next weeks passed in wary tension. Warren hired a ranch hand from town, a young man named Tom who slept in the barn and helped with the cattle in exchange for wages and meals. With an extra set of eyes on the property, Warren felt comfortable enough to return to his regular work, though he never strayed far. In early December, the first snow fell, blanketing the ranch in white silence. Vivian was now 7 months along, her belly so large she could barely see her own feet. The baby moved constantly, active and strong, and she often found herself talking to it as she worked, telling it about the father who waited to meet it, the life they would build together. Warren had become increasingly attentive as her time drew nearer, helping her with tasks that had become difficult, insisting she rest more often. In the evenings, he would sit beside her and place his hand on her belly, his face filled with wonder when he felt the child kick. "Strong," he would say with satisfaction. "This one will be a fighter." "Like its father," Vivian would reply, covering his hand with hers. They had moved past chaste kisses to something deeper, stolen moments of tenderness that left them both flushed and longing for more. But Warren refused to do anything that might harm the baby, so they contented themselves with embraces and long conversations, and the growing knowledge that their feelings ran far deeper than either had expected. On Christmas Eve, Warren surprised her by producing a small carved cradle he had been working on in secret, hidden away in the barn. It was beautiful, made from golden pine with rockers that moved smoothly and sides carved with stars. "My father made one for my brother," Warren said, watching her face anxiously. "I remembered how it looked, tried to copy it. I am not much of a carpenter, but I wanted our child to have something made with love." Vivian traced the stars with shaking fingers. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Warren, it is perfect." He set it beside their bed, in the room that had been Vivian's but had gradually become theirs. After their declaration of feelings, Warren had begun sleeping in the bed beside her, holding her through the night, his body curved protectively around hers. It was innocent, at least in action, but profoundly intimate in a way that made Vivian feel cherished beyond measure. The new year arrived with bitter cold and winds that howled around the house like living things. Vivian was enormous now, uncomfortable and tired, counting the days until her burden would be relieved. Mrs. Patterson had visited twice, checking on her progress and pronouncing everything normal. "Another month, I would guess," the midwife had said. "Maybe less. First babies can be unpredictable." Warren had nodded seriously, making mental notes of everything Mrs. Patterson said. On a frigid morning in late January, Vivian woke to a sensation she had been told to expect, but that still caught her by surprise. She lay still for a moment, assessing, then reached over to shake Warren's shoulder. "It is time," she said softly. Warren came awake instantly, sitting up so fast he nearly fell out of bed. "Time, the baby. Now." Despite her nerves, Vivian laughed at his expression. "Babies come when they are ready. Send Tom for Mrs. Patterson." And Warren breathed. "I am told this takes many hours." It did take hours, long ones filled with increasing pain that Vivian tried valiantly to hide. Warren hovered, useless and desperate, until Mrs. Patterson arrived and shooed him out of the bedroom. "This is women's work," the midwife said firmly. "You wait out there and boil water and pace like fathers do." But when the pains grew worse, when Vivian cried out despite her determination to be strong, Warren ignored the midwife's protests and pushed back into the room. He took Vivian's hand, letting her grip it hard enough to bruise, murmuring encouragement and love. "You can do this," he told her, his voice steady even though his eyes were terrified. "You are the strongest person I know. Just hold on to me. I am right here." And he was, through all the hours that followed, refusing to leave even when Mrs. Patterson muttered about propriety. He wiped Vivian's face with a cool cloth, supported her when she needed to walk, held her when she wept from exhaustion and pain. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, filling the room with pale winter light, a baby's cry split the air. Mrs. Patterson worked efficiently and then placed a tiny, squalling bundle in Vivian's arms. "A boy," the midwife announced with satisfaction. "Small but healthy. He has good lungs, that is certain." Vivian stared down at the red-faced infant, overwhelmed by love so fierce it stole her breath. He was perfect, every tiny feature a miracle. Then she looked up at Warren, who stood frozen beside the bed, staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "Would you like to hold your son?" Vivian asked softly. Warren's eyes snapped to hers. "My son," he repeated, as though testing the words. "Our son," she confirmed. He took the baby with trembling hands, cradling him against his chest with surprising competence. The infant quieted, apparently soothed by the steady rhythm of Warren's heartbeat. Warren looked down at the tiny face, and Vivian saw tears track down his weathered cheeks. "Hello, little one," Warren whispered. "Welcome home, Mrs. Patterson stayed for 2 days, making sure both mother and baby were recovering well. Tom took over most of the outside work, giving Warren the freedom to hover over his new family like a devoted sentinel. The baby, whom they named William after Warren's father, proved to be a good infant, crying only when hungry or wet. Warren took to fatherhood with the same steady determination he brought to everything else, learning to change diapers and walk the floor when William was fussy. More than once, Vivian woke in the night to find Warren standing by the cradle, watching the sleeping baby with that same expression of wondering love. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, the snow melting to reveal muddy earth and the first green shoots of new grass. William grew, his infant features beginning to resolve into something more distinct. He had dark hair like Vivian and eyes that were still the indeterminate blue of all infants, and when he smiled, which was often, he transformed both his parents into helpless, devoted fools. On a warm day in April, Warren came back from town with news. "They caught the men who have been terrorizing the homesteads. The marshal tracked them to a camp south of here. There was a shootout. 2 are dead, 1 is in custody. It is over." Vivian felt relief wash through her. For months, they had lived with that shadow hanging over them, that awareness of danger lurking just beyond the horizon. Now, finally, they could breathe easy. That night, after William was settled in his cradle, Warren drew Vivian into his arms. They had been careful since the birth, knowing she needed time to heal, but now he kissed her with an urgency that made her heart race. "I love you," he said against her mouth. "I should have said it before, should have said it 100 times, but I love you, Vivian. You and William both, more than I have words to express." "I love you too," she whispered back. "From that first day when you said the child would be ours, I think I started falling in love with you then. You have given me everything I could not even let myself hope for." He made love to her with tender reverence, mindful of her body still recovering but unable to hold back any longer. It was sweet and slow and everything Vivian had not known to want. This joining with someone who loved her, who chose her, who saw all of her and treasured what he found. Afterward they lay tangled together, listening to William's soft breathing from the cradle beside the bed. "I want more," Warren said quietly. More children, I mean, if you are willing. I want this house full of noise and life." Vivian smiled against his chest. "I am willing. Though perhaps we might wait a little while before starting on the next one. William is only 3 months old." "A little while," Warren agreed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The seasons turned and the ranch prospered. Warren's careful management and hard work began to pay dividends. The cattle multiplied, the land yielded, and slowly they transformed survival into something more like security. William grew, learning to sit up, then crawl, then pull himself to standing on wobbly legs. His first word was "Da," directed at Warren with a toothless smile that made the cowboy's eyes suspiciously bright. His second was "Ma," which pleased Vivian enormously. On William's first birthday, they had a small celebration, just the three of them and Tom, who had become more friend than employee. Vivian had baked a cake, and William had smashed his piece with gleeful enthusiasm, getting more on his face than in his mouth. "He looks like you," Warren said that night, watching as Vivian cleaned frosting from their son's hair. "He has your eyes, I think. They are turning brown like yours." "He has your stubbornness," Vivian countered fondly, "and your determination." Poor child, saddled with the worst traits from both of us. But Warren was grinning. In the fall, Vivian discovered she was pregnant again. Warren received the news with jubilant enthusiasm, spinning her around the kitchen despite her laughing protests. This pregnancy was easier than the first, without the shadow of shame and fear that had colored her arrival in Wyoming. She felt strong, confident, supported by a husband who adored her and a community that had slowly come to accept her. The baby arrived on a warm May evening, another boy they named Thomas for the ranch hand who had become family. He was bigger than William had been, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced his displeasure with the world from his first breath. Warren held both his sons, one in each arm, his face suffused with joy. "2 boys," he said with satisfaction. "A good start." "A start?" Vivian asked wearily from the bed, exhausted but happy. "How many children are you planning, Warren Whitfield?" "As many as God grants us," he replied, and she could not argue with that. Thomas proved to be more challenging than William had been, colicky and fussy. Warren walked him through the night, singing off-key lullabies while Vivian caught desperately needed sleep. They took turns, handing the crying infant back and forth, united in their determination to soothe him. By the time Thomas was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, they were both exhausted but had never been closer. The shared tribulation of a difficult baby had forged them into a seamless team, anticipating each other's needs, communicating in glances and half-sentences the way long married couples did. On a crisp October evening, with both boys finally asleep, Warren drew Vivian out onto the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the black expanse of sky like diamonds. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled her back against his chest, his arms circling her waist. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming here, marrying a stranger, building this life so far from everything you knew." Vivian covered his arms with hers, lacing their fingers together. "Never," she said honestly. "Sometimes I look at what we have built and I can hardly believe it is real. I came here desperate and afraid, carrying a child I did not know how to protect alone. You gave us both a home, a name, a future. You gave me love when you had no obligation to do so. How could I regret any of that?" "I am the one who should be grateful," Warren said. "You made this house a home. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. Now, every day matters. Every moment is precious because I share it with you and our sons." She turned in his arms to face him, the blanket falling away, forgotten. "We saved each other," she said. "That is the truth of it." We were both alone, both struggling, and we found each other at exactly the moment we needed to. He kissed her, and it still made her heart race the way it had that first time, still made her feel cherished and desired and loved beyond measure. The years flowed past, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing family. A daughter arrived 2 years after Thomas, tiny and delicate with Warren's Creek water eyes. They named her Julia, and she wrapped both her parents and her older brothers around her small finger from the moment of her birth. Another son followed, then another daughter, until the house rang with the sounds of 5 children, chaotic and joyful. The ranch expanded, more land purchased, more cattle acquired. Tom married a girl from town and built his own small house on the property, staying on as Warren's partner in the growing operation. The town of Pendleton grew as well, the railroad pushing west, bringing new settlers and new opportunities. The small church added a school, and the Whitfield children walked the 2 miles into town each day for lessons, returning with stories of friends and adventures that kept their parents entertained through supper. Warren's hair gained threads of silver at the temples. Vivian found her first gray hair and laughed when Warren said it only made her more beautiful. They grew into their marriage the way a river grows into its banks, shaped by the years but fundamentally unchanged in their devotion to each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren took Vivian back to the cottonwoods where he had first asked her to marry him. The children were home with Tom and his wife, giving the couple a rare afternoon alone. "You remember standing here?" Warren asked, his arm around her waist. "You cried, and I did not know if I had said the right things or made everything worse." "You said exactly the right things," Vivian assured him. "You offered me grace when I expected judgment. You gave me hope when I had none." "I offered you a partnership," Warren corrected. "What we have now, this is so much more than I imagined that day. I thought we might build a comfortable life, a friendship. I did not dare hope for love. And now I cannot imagine my life without you. You are the best part of me, Vivian. You and our children, this family we have built. It is everything I never knew I needed." She kissed him there under the trees, in the place where their story had truly begun, and felt the weight of 10 years of love and partnership and joy. William, their eldest, grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father. He never knew that Warren was not his biological father. The truth had never seemed important, never seemed necessary to share. Warren was his father in every way that mattered, and that was enough. On the day William turned 18, Warren took him aside. Vivian watched from the porch, knowing what her husband intended, her heart full. "I need to tell you something," Warren said to their son. "Something your mother and I have kept private, but that you deserve to know now that you are a man." He explained it all, the advertisement, Vivian's arrival, the circumstances of William's conception. He told it plainly, without embellishment, laying out the truth with honesty and love. William listened in silence, his young face serious. When Warren finished, the boy was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Does it change anything?" "Not a single thing," Warren said firmly. "You are my son. You have always been my son. I just thought you should know the truth." William nodded slowly. "Then it does not matter. You are my father, she is my mother. That is all I need to know." He paused, then added, "But thank you for telling me, for trusting me with the truth." Warren pulled him into an embrace, and Vivian saw both men's shoulders shake. When they broke apart, both were wiping their eyes and trying to pretend they were not crying. That evening, William found Vivian in the kitchen. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head the way he had when he was younger and not quite so tall. "I love you, Ma," he said simply. "I love you too," she whispered, her own tears flowing freely now. More than you will ever know. More years passed, and the Whitfield children began to leave home, starting families of their own. William married a sweet girl from town and brought her back to the ranch, building a house on the property so he could continue working alongside his father. Thomas went east to study, sending letters full of his adventures in Chicago. Julia married a rancher from the next county over, and the younger children were still growing, still finding their paths. Warren and Vivian found themselves alone again, the house quiet after so many years of noise. It was strange at first, the silence, but also sweet. They had time for each other again, for long conversations and leisurely mornings and the comfortable intimacy of a couple who had weathered decades together. On a summer evening, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for more than 25 years, Warren took Vivian's hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about that day you arrived. How frightened you must have been, how brave you had to be to step off that stage and trust a stranger with your life and your child's life." "I was terrified," Vivian admitted, "but you made it easy to trust you. You were so kind, so honest. I fell in love with you almost immediately, though I did not recognize it at the time." "I knew," Warren said, smiling. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how profoundly, how completely." "We have built something good here," Vivian said, looking out at the ranch, at the houses dotting the property where their children and grandchildren lived. "Something lasting." "We have," Warren agreed, "and we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still, God willing. Grandchildren to spoil, children to watch grow, each other to grow old with." "I cannot think of anything I would rather do," Vivian said softly. "Growing old with you is the greatest adventure I could imagine." He kissed her hand, his lips warm against her weathered skin that bore the marks of hard work and years in the Wyoming sun. And she thought of that young woman who had arrived here so long ago, desperate and alone. She would not recognize herself now, confident and loved, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that she had found exactly where she belonged. The stars came out one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative steps toward each other, that had shone over their wedding and the births of their children and every ordinary, extraordinary moment in between. The ranch settled into evening quiet, horses whickering in the barn, the wind sighing through the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. Warren stood and offered Vivian his hand. "Come to bed," he said gently. "Tomorrow starts early." She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet, and together they walked into the house they had built, into the life they had created from hope and courage and love that had surprised them both with its depth and permanence. Years continued to accumulate like snow on the mountains, softening the edges of memory but never dimming the essential truth of what they had found together. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new life and laughter. Warren taught them to ride, patient and careful as he had been with his own children. Vivian told them stories, baked them cookies, loved them with the fierce devotion of a woman who understood how precious family was because she had once faced the possibility of having none at all. On their 40th anniversary, their children organized a celebration. The house overflowed with people. 3 generations gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. There were speeches and tears and laughter, and Warren stood with Vivian at his side, overwhelmed by the evidence of what their love had created. 40 years, he said in his speech, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. 40 years ago, I placed an advertisement seeking a wife, and a brave woman answered. She came to me carrying another man's child, and I told her that child would be ours. It was the best decision I ever made, saying those words. Because it was not just the child who became mine, it was her heart, and she claimed mine in return. Everything you see here, everyone gathered in this room, exists because two lonely people took a chance on each other. Because we chose love even when we did not yet know what that would mean. He turned to Vivian, taking both her hands. You made me a rich man, not in gold or cattle, but in the things that matter. You gave me family, purpose, joy. You gave me a reason to be better than I was. I would live these 40 years again, every hardship and heartache, just to have the privilege of loving you. There was not a dry eye in the room, and Vivian, crying freely, pulled him down for a kiss that made their grandchildren giggle and their children shake their heads with fond exasperation. The seasons turned as they always had, as they always would. Warren's steps grew slower, his hands less steady, but his love never wavered. Vivian's dark hair turned silver. Her body grew frailer, but her spirit remained as strong as the day she had pointed a rifle at 3 dangerous men and told them to leave her property. They had lived long enough to see their children's children have children of their own. The ranch had expanded far beyond what Warren had dreamed that first hard year, now a thriving operation managed by William and his sons. The Whitfield name meant something in Wyoming, synonymous with integrity and hard work and family values that spanned generations. On a warm spring morning when Warren was 78 and Vivian was 75, they walked together out to the cottonwoods. It was more difficult now, their bodies protesting the distance, but they made the journey anyway, holding each other up. "This is where you asked me to be your wife," Vivian said, touching the rough bark of a tree that had witnessed so much of their story. "This is where our life truly began," Warren agreed. He pulled her close, and they stood in the dappled shade, remembering and grateful. "If you could go back," Vivian asked, "back to that day you posted the advertisement, knowing everything that would come after, would you do it again?" Warren did not hesitate. "Every time, in every life, I would choose you always." She smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart 48 years ago, still radiant despite the years. "Good answer, Cowboy." They walked back to the house together, and from the porch their great-grandchildren ran to meet them, young voices calling, eager hands reaching. Warren and Vivian were swallowed up in the joyful chaos of their legacy, surrounded by love that had started with a simple choice to take a chance on each other. That evening, sitting once more on the porch with the sun painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Warren looked at Vivian and saw not the elderly woman she had become, but every version of her he had known. The frightened girl stepping off the stage, the determined mother protecting her child, the loving wife building a home, the joyful grandmother welcoming new life, all of her all at once precious beyond measure. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Vivian asked, though she was smiling. "For answering my advertisement, for trusting me, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I was a rough cowboy who barely knew how to talk to a woman, for giving me everything I never knew I needed." His voice broke. "For being the greatest gift of my life." Vivian took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "We gave each other everything," she said. "That is what love does. It multiplies, transforms, creates something far greater than the sum of its parts. We started with so little, you and I. A lonely rancher, a desperate woman, a child who needed a father. And we built an empire of love from those humble beginnings." "An empire," Warren repeated, liking the word. "Yes, that is what this is. Not of land or wealth, though we have been blessed with both, but an empire of family, of connection, of love that will outlive us both." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, the same stars that had watched over them for nearly 5 decades. The house behind them was full of life and love. The land around them was prosperous and thriving, and their hearts, though aged, beat in sync as they always had. Warren Whitfield and Vivian Whitfield had taken broken pieces and fashioned something beautiful. They had chosen love over judgment, hope over fear, partnership over isolation. And in doing so, they had created a legacy that would endure long after their names faded from memory. They had lived a great love story, and they had lived it well. The end of their story came as all stories must, but it came gently, in the fullness of time. Warren passed first in his sleep on a winter morning with Vivian holding his hand. He was 82, and his last words were her name. She followed him 2 years later, surrounded by the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried her legacy forward. Her last words were about the day she had arrived in Wyoming, frightened and alone, and how a cowboy had looked at her belly and said the child would be theirs. "Best day of my life," she whispered, and then she closed her eyes and went to find him. They buried her beside Warren on a hill overlooking the ranch, under cottonwoods that had grown from the seeds of the trees where they had first spoken of marriage. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line that William had chosen. They chose each other, and that made all the difference. The ranch continued, generation following generation, built on the foundation of love that Warren and Vivian had laid. Children were told the story of their great-great-grandparents, how they had taken a chance on each other when they had every reason not to, how they had built something lasting from courage and hope. And on spring evenings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the stars emerged one by one, those who knew how to listen said they could still hear them. A cowboy's steady voice promising protection, a woman's grateful tears. The sound of two lonely hearts finding their home in each other. It was a love story, simple and true, the kind that transforms not just the lovers but everyone their love touches. It started with an advertisement and a desperate answer, and it grew into something that shaped the land and the people for generations to come. Warren and Vivian Whitfield had loved well, and they had loved long, and in the end, that was the greatest success any life could claim. They had found each other in a harsh land at a hard time, and they had made something beautiful together. They had taken a child who needed a father and given him a family. They had taken loneliness and transformed it into connection. They had taken fear and turned it into hope. They had lived their love story with courage and grace, and the echoes of it would endure as long as the Wyoming wind blew across the grasslands, as long as the stars shone over the ranch they had built, as long as their descendants remembered the truth at the heart of their beginning. She had come to marry carrying another man's child, and the cowboy had said it would be their child. And from that single act of grace, an entire world had been born.